I have come across a lot of people um, in recent years who are, for one reason or another, advocating for um, socialism. Now, these are individuals that have mostly grown up in a capitalist system because the West was mostly uh, bred on capitalism. It is only through capitalism that we have made the progress we've made over so many years, especially during the Industrial Revolution. If it wasn't for capitalism, we wouldn't have made the strides we've made so far. But for some reason or another, there's a lot of people out there advocating for, calling for uh, socialism. And I don't really understand, I don't know whether these people are aware of what socialism actually involves. I don't know whether they understand what socialism actually stands for. But nonetheless, that's what they're calling for. So I wanted to get a few things out in the open and make uh, draw some relations between the two economic systems so that we understand a little more clearly what's involved in each one and how one differs from the other. If I was to be asked tomorrow, if you had a choice between the two, which one would you choose? I would have to say that my choice would be capitalism. Not because I am an industrialist, not because I'm on the side of the rich and powerful, not because I have anything to gain from advocating for capitalism, other than the fact that the reason that I believe we have got to the stage we're at today, uh, progress wise, is the result of such a system. So I downloaded a table that draws some comparisons between one and the other. And here it is. It's got two columns. One is headed capitalism, the other socialism, and there's some classifications on the side, some aspects of each one that aspects and their comparisons between one system and the other. The first one is ownership, and it goes to say that assets in a capitalist system are owned by private companies and private individuals. Now, the private companies, of course, were put together by private individuals. It's a private ownership system. People who had vision decided to and saw an opening in the market, decided to start a certain business, and they grew that business from very humble foundations into sometimes very powerful organizations. In socialism, these assets are owned by government and cooperatives. They're not owned by private individuals, they're not owned by companies. So it's sort of closer to communism rather than the free capitalist system that that favoured the innovation that has got us to where we are today. The second aspect is equality. Equality. Now, capitalism believes that income is determined by market forces. So market forces, what does that mean? It means that it depends on how much responsibility your job carries, how well you do your job, how much effort you put into the way you do your job, and how much of an asset you are to your employer. If you're a business owner, your income is determined by how much you provide for the market in that particular industry that you're in. In a socialist system, there is just a redistribution of income, of wealth. So what happens is the producers, the innovators, the hard workers, they do all the hard work, and then all the funds that are collected from them, some in the form of taxes, in some cases the business is taken over and controlled to a certain extent by the state, and the wealth that the company makes, the wealth that the individual makes in many cases, is collected. A hell of a lot of it is taken off them, and it's redistributed amongst everyone. So the workers, the innovators, are doing all the hard work, and the wealth is being distributed amongst the non-innovators, the non-producers, the idle, the lazy. Everyone gets to partake, everyone gets a piece of the pie, even though they had no part in cooking it. Prices is the other one. Price is determined by supply and demand in a capitalist system. So if there is an oversupply of something, prices tend to stagnate or fall. There's too much of whatever it is in the market. If there's a lot of demand and not enough supply, prices go up, because everybody wants that certain item, that certain service, but there's not enough supply of that service. In a socialist system, there are price controls on everything. So it doesn't matter what the supply and demand is. The government has tools in place that controls the price. But that's not a good system. That causes stagnation, because if there is price controls along with other things in place like operational costs, red tape for companies, red tape for individual employers, for professional people, their overheads are extensive, they blow out, but the prices they're allowed to charge are capped, which then forces them to say, it puts them in a state of mind of, well, what's the point of me even trying to make progress anymore? It's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to get ahead, so I might as well just give it up and stay at the level I'm at right now. There's no point pushing for more innovation. And there's the factor of efficiency. Market incentives encourage firms to cut costs in a capitalist system. Yes, the idea of a company, the idea of a private firm, is the idea of any business is to be able to make a profit. The more profit they make, the better for them. But in order to make that profit, they need to sometimes cut costs. They need to reduce the costs of making that product in order to be able to make that product more cost effective. So there is a strong incentive for companies to cut back on the workforce, lay off workers, uh, pay out redundancies, get rid of deadwood. Whereas in a socialist system, government-owned firms have fewer incentives to be efficient. So they're more likely to hold on to deadwood. They're more likely to hold on to workers who are not pulling their weight. They're more likely to create positions that are not necessary just so that they can employ the extra people, just so that they can provide employment, because they go into the elections promising, one of the things they always promise is extra employment. So they'll just pull it out of a hat, like a rabbit out of a hat. They'll pull it out. They'll say, "Oh, we've created these many jobs," and most of the time it's casual jobs or it's menial jobs that don't really provide anything to the overall economy. They're just there to pay a wage and to show on paper that there are less people on the unemployment line. That's all they're designed for. Then we have taxes. In a capitalist system, we have limited taxes. Companies are able to try and minimize as much as they can their tax burden, their tax liabilities. And the government is therefore, as a result of that, collecting less in taxes. Now, they don't like that, because when they're collecting less in taxes, they're less likely to give themselves annual pay rises of thousands of dollars, and they're limited to how much they can spend and what they can spend it on, because the market then determines what they have available, what they can spend and what they are able to spend it on. Whereas in a socialist system, there are high progressive taxes. They're constantly progressing, they're constantly going up, there's constantly new ones, and higher spending on public services. Because they're collecting more in taxes, they're able to suck more out of the workers, suck more out of business. They are then able to spend more on public services. And what kind of public services are we talking about? We're talking about putting new toilets in parks. We're talking about putting flags down the main streets of towns. We're talking about money being spent on things that it doesn't need to be spent on. It can go to better use. But government has never been about spending money thoughtfully. They've just been all about spending money. Healthcare is another factor. Healthcare in a capitalist system is left to the free market. Now, just like when you buy a house, you take out insurance on your home. You buy a car, you take insurance out on your car. You take insurance out on your contents in your home. You pretty much take insurance out on most things that you worked hard for and you've acquired and you own. Your health is no different. If you value your health, you will take insurance out on your health. But because your health is now your responsibility, as it is in a capitalist system, you're more likely to take care of your health so that you don't end up having to pay out-of-pocket expenses. Even though you're insured, you don't need to pay the out-of-pocket expenses that come with the insurance policies. So you're more likely to take care of yourself than you are in a socialist system where healthcare is provided by government, free at the point of use. Free at the point of use. So you're free to treat your body as you feel. You're free to absolutely abuse yourself to the point where you get really sick, and then every time you feel unwell, you go to the doctor, and the government, the taxpayer, is forking out money to pay for each and every one of your visits. The problems with capitalism are inequality. Well, life wasn't meant to be easy, and it sure as hell wasn't meant to be equal. No human being was created equal, and no other animal on the planet was created equal. So equality is a concept that has been thought up by do-gooders and feel-good crowd and the woke crowd and the bleeding hearts. Market failure? Well, market failure is a very big possibility, because in a capitalist system there is also the factor of greed, which is also a factor that plays a part in the socialist system. But in a capitalist system, markets fail because there is nobody to pull them out. They're on their own. There is nobody there to say, you've fallen apart, you've fallen on your face, I'm going to lift you up, prop you up, and pull you out of your situation. No, they're on their own. So companies fail, they're allowed to fail, they're allowed to fall, and they either pick themselves up or they perish. There's no one there to save them other than themselves. It is a capitalist system after all. There is the possibility of monopolies in capitalism, as we saw with Microsoft, and as we saw with seen with the supermarkets of late. But in Australia, we have a so-called capitalist system, but it leans more towards socialism, and we still have a monopoly playing out between the supermarket giants. So it's not a phenomenon that's only unique to capitalism. It's also a phenomenon that's attributes also to socialism. In socialism, there's inefficiency of state industry. State-owned industries aren't very efficient. As we've seen, anything that the government has taken over and is in charge of has gone to shit. They pretty much don't know how to run anything. Now, take the NBN situation. You know, the government took over the NBN situation. They were going to provide fibre optic cable to every home in the country for $47 billion. That blew out to over twice that amount, and they still hadn't got close to it. So they decided they were going to go fibre to the node, and then, so a bottleneck, and into people's houses. They were going to utilise the old copper wire system that was in place already to people's houses, because it was going too expensive to go the other way. Nobody bothered to do their studies and think about the fact that Australia has vast amounts of land that is inhospitable and uninhabited. And to get fibre optic cable to those areas, it would cost a lot of money, and the return would not be lucrative enough. They didn't think of that. The other thing they didn't think about was the fact that the old Telstra pits and infrastructure had asbestos in them. And when they came up against that, the costs blew out dramatically. The other one was when the government decided that they were going to provide computers for students at school. And they provided all these computers at $4,000 a pop for each laptop computer. It was later discovered that these $4,000 computers were not worth $4,000 that the government paid for each one of them. Those computers were worth a few $100s each. The government was severely overcharged. They were taken to the cleaners because the people that were in charge of the whole process didn't know what they were doing. Then look at the insulation scheme, where people died putting insulation in houses because they paid huge amounts, huge sums of money to people to put in insulation in houses to make them more efficient. but they were by no means trained to do the work that they were charged with, and many of those companies were pop-up companies that disappeared as soon as the shit hit the fan. So government efficiency is non-existent. And there's also less incentives when government is in charge of the economy, because government likes to call the shots. Government likes to put limits on everything, and they don't allow business, they don't allow industry to go past a certain level without having to jump hurdles. And a lot of industry leaders just give up and say, well, you know, if I'm going to have to do all this, I might as well not even go there. The advantages of capitalism: dynamic economy, incentives for innovation and economic growth. Of course, the economy is going to be dynamic. Under capitalism, the economy will be dynamic because companies are allowed to price accordingly. They're allowed to hire and fire as they see fit. They're allowed to grow or shrink in size as they see fit. They're allowed to adjust to economic factors. Incentives, plenty of incentives. There's plenty of incentives in the capitalist system. The harder you work, the more of an innovator you are, the more ideas you have, the more effort you put in, the greater the reward. And as a result of that, more money is earned. And in the case of the worker, the more money they earn, the more tax they pay, and the economy, and the more money they spend. So not necessarily having to pay more tax. Let's say that they don't pay more tax, but they now have more money, more disposable income. And as a result of having more disposable income, they're able to spend more money, pumping it back into the economy, which makes the economy thrive. In a socialist system, there's promotion of equality. The promotion of equality. So everyone is equal. Everyone's practically got to be on the same pay. It doesn't matter if you're a better worker than the guy next to you. If you're doing the same job, you've got to receive the same pay. There are people who have been in the job for 40 years and someone joins up with no experience at all. And not only is that person expecting that they're going to get equal pay to the person that's been there 40 years and has got a lot of experience, a hell of a lot of experience, but they also whinge that they're not being treated equally. So the onus is on absolute equality. Everyone is equal. No, everyone is not equal. That is a fallacy. Everyone is not equal. Men are not equal to women. Women are not equal to men. There are certain things men and women can do better than the other. And there are certain things that certain industries can do better than other industries. And socialism attempts to overcome market failure. So if it looks like that the market is starting to waver a bit, the government intervenes, the government interferes and starts to pump money into different things like banks and certain companies, and it starts to prop everyone up. But it's all done with borrowed money. It's all done with taxpayer money. It's all done with money that the government doesn't have but has to get by other means. And those other means are either printing it with no basis or foundation, nothing to back it, or stealing it from the taxpayer, the earners. So you'll hear that, you know, one minute you're paying this much tax and the next minute they want to raise your tax to so much, by so much, and you saw it during the financial crisis where companies that were mismanaged and were falling to pieces were pulled out of trouble by government funds. And this is in America, which is supposed to be a capitalist society. Now, I don't know where the socialists get off saying that socialism is a better system than capitalism, but as far as I'm concerned, they need to have their head read, because there is no way that I, for one, would go for socialism over capitalism. I'm not rich, I'm not powerful, I'm not an industrialist, but I would rather a fair system like capitalism, a system that fosters opportunity, that fosters innovation, that fosters progress, rather than something that stifles all that. I don't know about you, but that's my view on the matter.